Augie, thank you so much. And we really appreciate this time with you as our participants because certainly all of us have done a lot of readjusting to what we've come to know as these unprecedented times. But I think it's important for us to spend some time, as this quote does, and really looking at how these times exacerbate a student experience that is already stressful. So the reason this is so critical is that you as a faculty member, in many cases, are the link as to whether or not we make this something that will work. As we know, based on what we want to do in educating our students and what we need to do for the university in these financial times, this has to work. And faculty are critical in whether or not we can keep students engaged, whether we can make them think that this is still a worthwhile experience. Even the credibility of higher education has been questioned, as we've heard throughout the summer. And so I think that this quote is in the opening slide so that we realize the gravity of the situation. And with that gravity comes our responsibility. So we've really got to re-examine and reapproach our teaching. And I know many of you as participants may also teach in other ways. So you may teach Sunday school, you may teach yoga, many of you teach your children. And so in those cases, we approach that in a very different way than we approach the college classroom. And it is going to cause us to really have to tune into our students' needs as much as our discipline and the content in ways that we do with other populations. And we're so grateful to be with you, not only because we deal with students' decision making every single day, but both Maureen and I are committed to teaching, and it is purely for the love of it. And so if you're asking why in the world do they have student conduct people talking to faculty about, it's because we also represent 3 decades of teaching and do it on the side because it is such a love. So both of us, I think, spend an enormous amount of time looking at how pedagogy and how really experiencing what students need has improved our teaching and their learning. And so we are excited to be able to share some of that with you today. Our learning outcomes look pretty simple. They are complex, but we want to help you build community and set expectations, because you are kind of the arbiter of what these new public health directive standards are. And students are going to take cues from you. They are coming in wide-eyed, wondering how in the world this experience is going to go. And so the tone that you set from the beginning is going to be critical as to getting buy-in from your students, most especially for the public health directives, but also to make sure to hook them so that they know that the university isn't opening just to take their money. The university is opening because we believe that we can deliver the same quality education with a very different environment, and that we are committed to doing so. The second is to articulate how do we respond if there's a concerning behavior. I think many of you may have registered for this because you're concerned about that, and that's a pretty stressful scenario. And so we want to walk through what that could be like. So other new dynamics that are a little bit different from last semester. There's a lot of grief from losing rites of passage for first-year students. When we think about our own developmental phases and going from being a teenager into an adult, prom and graduation and senior ceremonies were all part of that. That has been taken away. So there are a lot of things that I think cause a student to feel a little bit slighted as it is, mostly for our first-year students in those rites of passage. Also some blame for unmet promises for students who are returning and transfers. Everything happened so quickly because there was so much concern over the pandemic spreading so quickly. They don't know where to place that blame because there is no one to blame. It's something that is out of control. And in many cases, that feels difficult when there isn't someone to blame. So if they're looking for that and they're looking to point a finger, it's going to be for the university. You become part of that overall quote unquote university. And insecurity with increased online requirements. Many students last year, just like our faculty and staff, really struggled with making the transition to online requirements. And when they couldn't do it and they already felt kind of defeated, some of them gave up. So we've got to make sure that we are kind of being their hype person when it comes to their online requirements and their security related to that. Lack of open access to student services, they've been able to walk in, get what they need. As you know, this generation is also, I want it when I want it. And now all summer they've been ordering from Amazon. It's been delivered in like the next minute and a half. That isn't going to be accessible to them anymore. And obviously, for us, for them, that's going to cause some frustration. Loosening of the connections that promote an environment of academic integrity. As we know, anonymity breeds contempt. It's going to feel like a much more heightened anonymous environment, and it's our job to make sure to reverse that. Peer pressure. A lot of our students may be bought into the agreement of going ahead and wearing their face coverings. They've seen a lot of outreach, a lot of town halls that say this, but if they walk into a residence hall on the first day, and Residence Life is being vigilant about advertising this, but if they walk in and they're the only one in the hallway with a face covering, there is no way that that isn't going to affect an 18-year-old. So we can put all of the proper messaging out, and then we have to be aware that the environment you set in the classroom is going to have kind of some peer influence. And lastly, all of this is happening while we are under a time frame of cost containment. So many of us have positions in our areas that are not fulfilled. We can't produce what we could before the cost containment to meet students' needs in the same way. And this is tough. This is a less than ideal time to be a college student, but our faculty members are the people who connect and who can empathize. And so when we look at the real definition of empathy, it isn't just putting ourselves in their shoes. It is also trying to fix it. So making sure that we're looking at how do we help fix some of these issues for students where we have the ability and have some control. So some of our course content for today, how do we build buy-in for new classroom norms? Because if we just say it and it's top down, it is much less, there's much less efficacy than if students are bought into it. Addressing COVID-related anxiety, which is going to be very real and I believe palpable in your classroom. Prioritizing engagement. If we can keep our students hooked, we can increase their academic success. Addressing academic integrity in jeopardy and how we can curtail that. And then addressing some of the public health directive violations and how to set the tone from the beginning through the end. So approach and tone is going to be everything. If we come in and say, this is how it is, and this is what you're going to do, and this is what happens if you don't, those have to be covered, but we have to let them know, again, that we empathize, that this is difficult for everyone and you're making those same adjustments. So making sure that your tone is, hey guys, we've got to do this together. We've got to make sure that we're looking out for each other. Please, please, please. I know that they have heard every iteration of we're all in this together. So making sure that they hear it from you and that you care about their health as well. It's hard on all of us for different reasons. Sharing what your situation is, I think, is appropriate if it's comfortable for you to share and it isn't too personal. And giving students a chance to make it. We don't want to just go heavy-handed on the very first time that there is an issue. We want to let them know that we are empathic, but we must uphold standards. And we've got to resist mirroring students' levels of stress. As I said, we're going to see that. And if we respond and we're not role modeling with, we can get through this, but there are going to be some bumps along the way, I think it will help them also feel reassured. Letting students know that many of these decisions are made even above us, not because we disagree with them, but also because we've got to be fair and protect everyone in, with some equity. And so some of what you're doing is because everyone in the university is bought in, and it is not that you are in any way being biased. And lastly, sharing your why. Why are you continuing to teach in person? Why are you wearing your face covering? Why are you committed both to trying to be an educator and do your best and protect the family and the vulnerable groups that are within the circle that you affect every single day? So COVID and anxiety. Dr. Rebecca Caldwell and Dr. April Scott through Health Initiatives. Dr. Scott is also a PhD in psychology, did a session on how we could pretty much anticipate that every student is feeling a heightened level of anxiety. Yes, every single student. It's going to come to different degrees, absolutely. But when we look at some of the roots of anxiety, it comes from a sense of safety. A lot of people have no sense of safety. And to kind of even increase that vulnerability, we have a lot of students register with our Student Disability Resource Center to the tune of 588 who may be diabetic or asthmatic or have heart conditions. They're affected by the people around them every single day. So you are in the position of deciding whether they're forced into being the one to leave because they're looking around, they don't feel like people are abiding by health directives, or whether they feel like they can be safe. That is a pretty intimidating environment to walk into. Also, our students with psychiatric conditions are typically triggered by anxiety. So we want to be sensitive to that, be ready to be flexible in understanding it's hard to concentrate or focus when you're under additional stress. Can we offer extra time if they share that with us? Do we give some flexibility in deadlines? It might have been due at 5, let's make it due at midnight. Anxiety is also exacerbated by a lack of feeling of connectedness. Even not being able to hang out is going to increase people's time just to be in their own heads. This feeling of hopelessness, I think none of us anticipated that it would be the situation that it is and rising so much in August. We knew that it was going to be long term, but that may give a student who has a much shorter lifespan a feeling of hopelessness. A lot of fear of the unknown has been activated, and it's going to be difficult for us to really know how our students are doing because we can't read their facial cues the way that they could before, and they cannot read ours. We know that there's also a lot of positive psychology related to people making eye contact when there's a smile. That is impossible. People can't feel some of those positive and reassuring, just very simple psychological cues.
Another thing you can do is help your students, encourage them to create these healthy habits. We know that many students are participating in student organizations and other activities that are pivoting to go virtual, but continuing to remind them and figuring out if there are ways to reinforce in some of your syllabus statements or assignments these things in small group discussions on your online classes that you may have for your virtual days, but encouraging those connections to family and friends back home, especially if you're going to be teaching first-year students who, like Elisa mentioned, have really experienced a pretty significant sense of loss from not being able to complete their high school experience in person. I shared in the chat box some helpful mindfulness and self-soothing activities that our Center for Health and Wellbeing has. There's some great stress management consultations that students can sign up for in the virtual capacity. There's also some mindfulness led each day on Facebook and some podcasts that students can listen to as well in the residence hall or on a walk around campus, remaining socially distanced to help with that stress management. Our Student Success Center offers great time management consultations and can help students. We know that the main number one reason when we talk to students for academic integrity cases about why they say they cheat, it is that I didn't manage my time well and I got stressed and overwhelmed. So the more we can help students break our assignments down into pieces and help them realize, you know, the third week of October, you might have a major assignment in all of your coursework. How can we plan ahead in August to prevent that anxiety from occurring in mid-October? How do we role model and also display that we're getting a healthy amount of sleep, diet, and exercise, especially towards November when daylight savings time will occur and it will get darker much earlier. You know, there's research to support being outside has been helping people manage their stress and anxiety during the pandemic. That will be even more important as we see shifts in the weather. If there's extra credit options, we know students love extra credit. We also know, like Elisa mentioned, these high stakes assignments are going to be something that causes stress for students. So are there options that you can have related to self-care for your specific discipline or research that they can conduct to see how this connects back to the course that you're teaching? And then just expressing that general concern for their well-being early and often. The first slide talked about making it human this semester more than ever, and we know our faculty are such a reason why our students feel so connected to campus. That starts from the welcome email, and each class and each time you're communicating with them, whether that's in person or virtually, expressing that genuine concern for their well-being. In regards to what student state causes the anxiety to be heightened for them, unclear syllabus statements or unclear expectations. So we know that most people will probably be pivoting their syllabi and assignments at some point this semester, but making sure we're communicating them clearly, whether that means posting them on Blackboard, sending an email, using the announcements feature, announcing things in class, really making sure that we're honing in on making sure we're communicating in as many different platforms as possible, as clearly as possible. We know that when we say things, people always don't remember them the same way. So any opportunity to say that in a written format is very helpful. In regards to assignment instructions, if you have an example of an A+ paper or project from a previous semester, posting that to Blackboard. I know in University 101, they talk about regularly role modeling the way, having your supplemental instruction assignment teacher or an assignment from the previous semester to say, this is what an A+ paper looks like, or this is the rubric and how you'll be graded. Students want that level of specificity. For high stakes presentations or tests, we know that if an assignment or a presentation is going to be 50% or more of a student's grade, that their anxiety increases dramatically. So I've seen some professors who have, 3 or 4 quizzes that are each 20% and they drop the lowest one. That's letting the students know that they'll have an opportunity, to maybe not be at their best one day and still make good performance in your class. High stakes anything, again, if we can have an opportunity for them to have that extra credit assignment or alternative methods to complete it, whether that's creative assignments or different examples of how to break down one of those larger scale research projects. Those will be especially important as students transition back into the classroom learning this semester. The best thing you can do is address this in your syllabus in a welcome email. So a great opportunity to send them an email and to post on Blackboard or in a video how excited you are to teach. Why is this specific course material important to you? And like Lisa mentioned, why are you excited to teach in person this semester? Sharing some of the things that you might have missed when we went virtual this past spring lets them get that excitement from you. It's contagious when you're in an environment where people are passionate about the content. Letting them know what the expectations for this semester will be. I just submitted my syllabi for this semester, and putting a statement in there about what the face coverings and social distancing expectations will look like. Also putting a little disclaimer in our attendance section this year about what the potential grade or academic penalties will be if students miss courses. We know that the likelihood that some students will have to be in quarantine or isolation is high, and being able to have opportunities for students to be able to make up work or participate in a virtual environment if they can't come to the classroom will be important, and letting them know the expectation is that we ask them to stay at home if they're not feeling well and not to come expose their classmates, because we want people to feel safe in the classroom. And then letting that enforcement be balanced with grace. So being able to let people have an opportunity, and we have some example statements further in the presentation about reminding people to grab their mask, reminding people to maybe take a couple steps back before we're immediately shutting the class down or yelling or engaging in some of the viral videos that we've seen this past couple months in some of our public stores. The last thing that's important to do is to build that buy-in. So at the beginning of class, allow people to discuss their expectations with others. So it doesn't really need to come all from you. It can come from their peers. The likelihood that someone in the class is a high-risk student or has a family member who's experiencing challenges as a result of a pre-existing condition is high, and having other students disclose, it's important for me to be able to care for my family or care for my partner, significant other, roommate, and also to be able to feel like I can be a part of this vibrant learning environment. So helping them address their expectations. The Carolinian Creed is also a great teaching tool for this, and our demonstrating concern for others tenet, and letting students really talk through how are we going to live that out? What does that mean? We're going to demonstrate concerns if people can't come to class. We're going to help them give them our notes from the class or help them talk through problems they might have not understood. And then letting them know, you know, we're in this together. We all want to be successful and make it to the end of November in person before we go to that last week of virtual learning. But we know if there's a lack of compliance, classes may have to go back online much quicker. We know that the students who have selected to take classes in person want that in that vibrant learning environment, that to be able to see each other face to face and have those dialogues in person. So letting them know we're all part of the solution together, and that the actions of a few really can have impact on the greater whole, and they're going to be the people that get to kind of choose that destiny.
Just there was a question about the attendance, which was probably triggered by the slide of encouraging students to stay home if they are not feeling well. I want to make sure everyone reads the document COVID in the Classroom. This was a huge focus. The new attendance policy doesn't go in effect till fall of 2021, but we are encouraging faculty to adopt it now, which means that there's no penalties for excused absences. And it also details exactly what a student needs to do if they are not feeling well, to get that documented and submitted to the faculty or instructors. So it will be considered an excused absence. And that also goes back to why we need to be very flexible with either live streaming or lecture capturing our classes, because we don't want students to fall behind, but we also don't want them to come to class because if they're fearful they're going to miss the information. So I've posted a couple times in the chat. I just want everybody that's attending that those finite details of how to handle keeping sick students out of the classroom. Faculty Senate spent a lot of time thinking through that, and it gives different examples. Thank you.
Along with Faculty Senate, the Student Disability Resource Center has spent an enormous amount of time trying to determine how they can still best meet students and faculty members' needs. And so some of the updates that are very relevant to faculty during this time is being aware that because COVID is a health threat, face coverings are required. And so we want to put that in, not you can't just not because it's not a reasonable accommodation. We want to let students know what the options are. So letting students know the accommodation options are face shields, which are available at the SDRC for free, and online classes. And so the SDRC has been communicating with their students, but as you know, with students, that's a two-way street. And so if you have a student that is not wearing a face covering and says that it is because of a disability, there is an online referral form that is already in the chat box where you can refer them verbally to the SDRC, and you can let the SDRC know online, and then they will reach back out to that student. So they're going to try to connect them as quickly as possible. This is also noted later, but please know that if you have a student who comes to you at the beginning of class and they're discussing their disability, that is a very private conversation, and sometimes students kind of lose that edit button. So please do not make announcements that could identify that student in front of the class. Even though you want to kind of clarify some things and it's well-intentioned, do try to ask the student to come see you after class once there's a little bit less traffic. When it comes to test proctoring, the SDRC is in a tough position because they can usually put a lot of students in one classroom and have a live proctor. Now, because of the distancing, that's going to become much more difficult. So they need at least 5 days in advance. If you have a student who has identified themselves through the communication from SDRC as a student who warrants accommodations related to test taking, please note in advance they need at least 5 days. Not only because of limited seating, in many cases, their coordination with you as a faculty member can still take 5 days because they may need a large print edition of the test, lots of other things, and they're going to be, they're going to experience a deluge. We have thousands of students with disabilities, and this pandemic exacerbates a large majority of those students' conditions. Also, eating and drinking in the classroom. Some of our diabetic students do have an accommodation that they can, so they would be able to remove their face covering for a very short time. Some can do it in the classroom, some cannot. That will be kind of enumerated in the communication that you receive. So do know some have the ability to stay in, and others, they have been instructed to quietly exit the classroom, take what they need to take in and then quietly re-enter. And so being very cognizant of which that may affect and talking to them about where they sit in the classroom will be pivotal. We certainly don't want them passing a lot of students on the way out. So discuss it both with the student and with the SDRC. And SDRC is doing an incredible job of being as accessible to students as possible, even though we can't have students just doing walk-in appointments. And so they have virtual appointments, virtual drop-in email appointments, and phone call appointments. And again, they have created an entirely new form just for faculty to make those referrals. Now, here's the thing. If you have a student who has been diagnosed, you do not refer them to the SDRC, which has already started happening. The student undergraduate ombudsperson has a student report form. So just to test this morning on sc.edu, I tested these forms and they are readily accessible. So it's called the student report form through the ombuds office. And that's how if you are told by the student that they have been diagnosed, they will assist. Also, the Student Health Center's hotline is wonderful for just asking for advice. So there are lots of resources that are there for faculty for whatever level of kind of risk presents itself to you by your students. So one of the things we talked about in the beginning is how important it is to hook our students, to let them know that we are invested in their success, really difficult time. And so one of the go-tos is Flower Darby. And Flower Darby is not only the Assistant Dean for Online Innovation Pedagogies, but she has recently published a book with Dr. James Lang called Small Teaching Online, Applying Learning Science in an Online Setting. But most of her strategies are also in person. The CTE had her as the keynote speaker, and this is where we really got convinced that she is one of the go-to gurus. And this is before we even realized that we were going to be needing kind of some more versatility as far as online strategies and in-person strategies. One of her key recommendations is a goals contract. So asking your students to answer these questions, which can be in a discussion board post, it can be through a blog, it can be through a journal, because what we know is that traditional age students lack some of the higher executive functioning skills that are necessary to know when to ask for help. This is the most critical semester for them to know when to ask for help. A lot of people who know when to ask for help still are reticent to ask for help. And so by doing this at the beginning of the semester, it challenges them to examine what they may struggle with, and then requires them to plan out which resources they will use. So this is a really ingenious way to help a student kind of build their own agency and know what to do. And as many of you who work with younger students have probably experienced, sometimes the answer is right in front of them, but due to stress and other factors, they can't even see it. And if they don't reach out to us for help, we don't know what's happening. And so there's a simple solution, and we just want to get them there. So having them answer these questions on the first, second day, and spending some time providing some feedback, if it is through a blog or discussion board, would be invaluable. I think also if it's on a discussion board and students are comfortable sharing, then they can also see what their colleagues are identifying as potential challenges and which resources they're identifying. Also from Dr. Flowers is the science of emotion. So what we're really having to do, and I appreciate some people in the chat box picking up on this, is to be more human than ever. So looking at the science of emotion is critical. She's also a senior instructional designer, and so she says, we think of a lot of pedagogy, and higher education as being, very straightforward and very black and white, and that doesn't make sense. Emotions are central to our humanity. And so knowing that emotion and cognition are linked, I think a lot of studies previously thought that they were in separate parts of the brain, which they are, but they are activated simultaneously. So if we're using and role modeling our own emotions as part of the learning environment, they start to build that kind of ease of going, this is a human setting when we're in a very isolated environment. But we know that emotions grab our attention, they keep us interested in things, they motivate us, they inspire us, and these are all things we want to be able to bring to our students. So bring your passion to create the atmosphere. Share bits of yourself, we've already alluded to, why you're in the field. Relate topics maybe that are current events to what you're teaching, and explain why that caught your eye. Ask them what has caught their eye, relating what you've learned in the classroom to what's currently happening. And go ahead and design for emotion. When you're looking at your first day especially, we want to hook them on the first day. So make that welcome video. Let them know that you're human. Show them your cat. It doesn't matter. Let them know that you are a three-dimensional being who is in the classroom because you care. Now, if part of you is like, I'm scared to death, I know most of us are, but that doesn't change the fact that we're also there because we are committed to helping students and helping them matriculate and helping them grow into their whole beings. So the other kind of, I think, psychological trick to this is, if you show students that you like them, you care about them, you're asking how they're doing, you're asking about how their other classes are going, if you happen to recall that they had a big test and you follow up on that, we all know that we like to talk about ourselves. So they're more likely to like you back if you're asking them questions about themselves. We always say that the most interesting person is the person who asks other people questions. People walk away and go, gosh, how fascinating they are. This is the most easy way to create some buy-in, just asking them questions about how they're doing and letting them know that you care. So what we have identified is, Darby also talks about nudging and letting students know that you notice when things aren't going well, so that we can still kind of pick them up before it gets to a point of no return. So we've kind of identified what are some ideas that you can do as the semester progresses. So in August, again, that introductory video and the first day strategies, we talk about the first day strategies and the other fostering webinars that we do. All of those are going to be central to this particular semester. Check in on day 3 as to who hasn't logged on to Blackboard. Just send them a quick note, which is so quick and easy in Blackboard. Keep a seating chart. This is for multiple reasons. You want to be able to track absences quickly so you can identify who you want to reach out to, but we also need that for contact tracing. So having, I think that, one of our maximum class capacities is about 40 students, and so having a seating chart and just noting, which seats are empty is a very easy way to determine who is already starting to fall off early in the semester, so that you can hook them back in. Also, provide the framework in the beginning in August. As we know, sometimes these days feel so long and it feels like we're not making progress, and then days fly by. Show them what your roadmap is. If that's a concept map, that's another excellent way to do it. And also make sure that we're not just asking really pithy questions that have an obvious answer. Provide pointed questions, complex questions that kind of motivate their interest and get them more invested in your content. Other things from Dr. Darby for September. So on your first major exam, see who failed and send them a personalized message. If you say nothing but, I want you to be successful, if you know what went wrong during this exam, I'm happy for you to share that with me, so I might be able to help. If you're not sure, let's connect during my virtual office hours. Just letting them know that you are invested in their success is huge. We know that students who aren't successful from the beginning have a much harder time climbing the hill back up. So if we can let them know that we are invested in their success from the beginning, the likelihood is we can see them through to the end of the semester. So different ways to approach that. Some options are just building self-efficacy. I know you can do this. I know that you have the wisdom to be in this class. Maybe something else is going on that I can help you with, or I can refer you to someone who can. Cite the resources. Give them the links to the Student Success Center. Give them the links to Student Health Center, stress management consultations. Send those links to them so that they can easily access them through your email. offer your own help. If you're not comfortable offering your own help, just let them know, tell me what the main issue is, and I will connect you with someone. And most of all, express concern. Again, the more human we are throughout this process, the more likely we are to help students deal with whatever the distraction is that's keeping them from being able to complete their academic work, which we know that they are capable of doing. Have them practice uploading a low-risk assignment before a high-risk submission. If you have a specific platform that you're using and it may be unfamiliar to a student, if they spend hours and hours and hours and they can't upload it, sometimes they give up. So have them practice uploading that sometime in September. Ask students what they're struggling with the most in class. That is a huge indicator of who is going to be successful or not. And students who aren't struggling may say, I'm good, fantastic. But if there's somebody who you haven't been able to notice because they're quiet or they just don't share much, sometimes asking them through an online format may be where they'll share. Acknowledging COVID's effect on anxiety, giving them the tips to cope. We have to talk about it in our classroom and say, this is real. Students all around you are experiencing this. Please don't feel alone. Here are the things that exacerbate it, and here are the things that are available on campus to help deal with it. And lastly, show them how they're making progress. It is going to feel like an uphill climb, I fear, all semester long. Show them the progress that they're making. October. Usually fall break is kind of our mental health break. Not so. So ask them in advance of fall break, what are you going to do to take care of yourself? Conduct a check-in. Hey, what advice would you give somebody entering the semester that you would do differently? How are you doing? Are you doing as well as you expected? Is it harder than you thought it was going to be? Ask them this, and this doesn't have to be in a classroom conversation. It really depends on the trust that you've built in your class and the size of your class. So measure those components to see what you think will work best, or whether or not it's through email or through a chat or through another platform. Ask about syllabus clarifications as deadlines loom. So as Maureen addressed, students have communicated that the thing that adds to their anxiety is a lack of clarity. For some reason, students don't ask. I have had assignments that I thought were clear, and then the teaching assistant in my classes said they are blowing me up on GroupMe. They don't understand, and they are so stressed out. I had no idea. So that was a wonderful learning moment for me to say, I need to ask. We've reviewed this, you guys. Do you have any questions? And guess when those questions come? On Sunday night. So letting them know, let's review all of the instructions. Please communicate if there's a problem directly to me, and I'm happy to answer that. Send a personalized message of Student Health Services remote health and wellness programs. Just let them know, here's what's available. We want you to do well. The academic integrity component of this that is worrisome, again, is the feeling of anonymity. Now, this is going to surprise some of you, but there is actually no research that supports that there is an increase in cheating for online exams or online courses. But we kind of get ourselves into that belief system. There's a lot of research that shows that people believe that to be true, but it is not necessarily accurate. So what these quotes kind of encapsulate is why students may be more likely if we as faculty and instructors don't do it right. So if they're under stress because we haven't been clear, 50% of their grade is the final exam, they feel all of that pressure, they're not sure what they're supposed to do, they're not sure how to upload it, and they're online anyway, we're not using our Blackboard Respondus monitors, that opportunity grows. And so all of the resources that you need as a faculty member are in place to assure that we can combat what kind of breeds the temptation to cheat. And so I want you to take that really seriously as we kind of finish and refine building our course syllabi to say, you know what, these are free. The Respondus applications are free through Blackboard. They are easy to use. Keeping a test open for the time of your course period is absolutely a recommendation. If you have a student with a disability who needs the accommodation of longer, we're of course going to accommodate that. However, There's a once it's open for 4 hours, what have we done? Increase the temptation. Now, we can't get in people's heads. We're not responsible for everything. We can't control everything. But academic integrity is more in jeopardy during this, especially if they feel like you don't know who they are, you don't care if they succeed, you don't know what their name is. Please, all of these kind of dovetail to say, I care about you knowing this. I'm going to make sure that we do quizzes along the way so that they're lower pressure. I want to make sure that we're using progressive due dates for that final project. So if you do have something big at the end, which component of it is due in September? That way there's no 3 a.m. oh crap moment, because there's no way they can get it done. They only have the last few hours of completion due at the end. We have been using this strategy for decades, and it is proven positive. I had a student last semester who cheated, and he said, you know what? We moved online. I couldn't figure out how to upload all my homework assignments. So I reached out to the instructor, and they didn't answer before the due date, which probably is an indicator of when he was uploading them. But nonetheless, students, again, are very quick-minded. When they send something, they expect something back. He said it had been 2 days, hadn't heard from the instructor. So he felt like he really had to get an A on the final assignment to make up for not getting the homework assignment credit. This is such a solvable problem. That temptation was there. He didn't feel like someone was responding. He didn't understand the platform because they hadn't practiced it earlier. So all of those, when we look back, are things that are solvable. Not necessarily that the faculty member had time during the spring to fix that, but now we do.
There are also a lot of things that you can do as an individual to minimize that disruption and increase distancing in your classroom. I know number 2 on our poll at the beginning was the thing that most people were anxious about in teaching this semester. And these are some tips of what you can do. So arriving early to class on the first day with your facial covering on, and again, even a step back, including that in your email. Sharing with your students that you took the I Pledge Columbia pledge that I've just shared in the chat box, and encouraging them to do the same. Asking students who do arrive first to sit in the back of the class, and that way the number of students who are having to walk past each other has that limited exposure. Once you have that seating chart after the first day, or if you plan to have one for the first day, sharing with students on Blackboard where you expect them to sit. If a student does arrive late or forgets their face covering, asking them, hey Lisa, do you have the ability to quickly go retrieve your face mask? Perhaps you left it in the car. Oh, there's actually a free single-use one over here. If I hand this to you, would you mind placing this on? We know that the overwhelming majority of students are going to be compliant because they are so excited about having these in-person classes. But for the few that aren't, we'll have a process to deal with that. But the first and most important thing is to give them that opportunity to mend that behavior and to correct that distancing or potential disruption to the classroom. For students who aren't in compliance, we do have a couple of the different options. Like we said, there will be additional face coverings available to them. If they can go get one quickly from their car or residence hall room, that may be an option as well. Some folks I know have shared, the university will be providing them. Some people I know also plan to just purchase a box and carry them around with them. So people have different options based on your level of comfortability. Being able to address privately if a student does have a medical or disability related reason for not wearing a face covering. Like Elisa stated, many of those students may be wearing face shields or other accommodations. Another helpful thing that you can do is having students fill out a survey before class starts and asking, is there anything that they want to share with you in advance? Some students may share a medical or disability related concern about their face covering. Other students may share the pronouns that they use or a different name. It can be a helpful way of students feeling supported in advance from the class from that first day. And then really thinking through, how am I going to address students who may be anxious or demanding if there's someone who forgets their face covering and it's a day of an exam or a major assignment and they're nervous about the academic penalty that they may receive if they aren't eligible to stay in class. So again, that goes back to the beginning of being able to have expectations and communicating clearly what the makeup policies or other accommodations may be for people who forget. But I think after the first week or two, students are going to know, bringing your face covering to class is going to be as normal as bringing your textbook or your computer. So it'll be helpful to just have a plan, role play what that conversation looks like. It's very similar to the bystander intervention training that our students receive of how am I going to confront someone politely if the face covering doesn't cover their mouth or nose. There's also other students in your course that will be great for that peer-to-peer support, right? So encouraging them to connect with each other. So in the courses that we teach, we always have students share their phone number with a fellow buddy in the class and kind of have an attendance and accountability partner to say, if I'm going to miss something, in addition to looking at the syllabus and reaching out to the professor, there's someone else in the class that I can reach out to say, hey, what did I miss? Can you explain to me this concept in a little bit further detail? Hey, I noticed I didn't see you today. I hope everything's okay. Again, creating that sense of community helps the peers feel more accountable to say, if I don't come to class today, my buddy might be depending on me. They may not be able to come either. This person can also do those emotional check-ins and kind of those pump-ups to say, great job on that last assignment. We're gonna have a virtual study hour together to make sure that we understand the concepts, creating our study guides to review. There also may be opportunities on discussion boards to have students share what are their main concerns, how do they feel group dynamics should be, what should options, what creative solutions do they have if students are absent or assignments that may be alternatives. Students are much more creative oftentimes than we give them credit for, and some of them will have great suggestions that we can use to kind of help hold their peers and other folks accountable in the classroom. And then lastly, addressing the concerns for when there are there. So letting them know that if they won't comply with the public health directive after you give them a reminder, that you will be submitting a report at the Office of Student Conduct. So we'll put that link in the chat box, but if a student doesn't comply after you've given them that reminder, you're absolutely welcome to refer them to our office where they'll have an educational conversation and meeting with one of our conduct administrators to be able to clarify these are the policies, these are the expectations, and this is why we're taking these so seriously. So you'll be able to document some very simple questions in that form, and then our office will take it from there. Letting them know, to email you if they feel sick, encouraging them to stay home and make that appointment to fill out that form with the student ombuds person. And then just like always, if a student just kind of goes to your class and stops coming, referring them to the Student Success Center's early alert program so someone else can reach out to them as well to say, hey, I've noticed you stopped coming to class. Is everything okay? We know those nudges and personal touches are what helps students personally identify with our coursework and academically succeed. And then at that point, if they're not able to be successful, there would always be the opportunity to refer students to our care team as well.
So again, this document was put together. It's giving suggestions on attendance policies, where to instruct students to go if they are not feeling well. The Ombudsman has created a COVID reporting form, and so it lists how students are supposed to contact the nurse on the COVID hotline, and Student Health Services has confirmed with us that they will send an email that can document that they did seek information, and if for some reason that email does not happen, we suggested that a screenshot of somebody's phone that they dialed that number and had dialed the number for more than 10 seconds could also suffice. Okay, it looks like Alyssa's back. You can jump in now then.
Thank you, everyone. That's a horrible feeling not to be able to say, I cannot click the button. And Dr. Bell, thank you. I think that if we did a How I Spent My Summer Vacation for you and Dr. Addy and the Dean of Students and Dr. Kelly and others, this is how you spent your summer vacation. And this document is wonderfully instructional. And we put just this clip on here. We don't expect people to read it here, but I think one of the things that as we determine our own destiny, I bought my own box of one-time use coverings for my classroom so that if I have to ask a student and they say, no, I can't, but I have to take the test, you know what, it's easier. It's worth it for my 20 bucks on Amazon just to be able to hand it to them. Also, because if it does not go as expected and the student says, I won't, then we have, a bit of an increased level of defiance. And so that is something that would rise to the level of the conduct office. We certainly want to be accommodating when a student is just kind of getting used to the new routine. But it is certainly, if I hand a student a face covering and they refuse it, I think that we kind of understand that that's on a different level than faculty are necessarily going to have to do all the heavy lifting for. So addressing these public health violations, what is going to happen? What is necessary to understand is that students, of course, have due process rights. And so we've got to be able to justify that they had knowledge and that they made a deliberate choice not to comply with the university. So the charge would be a failure to comply charge, but we've got to make sure that they knew and that it was deliberate. So fairness requires an outline of consequences in multiple ways. So what we are asking in order to make this work is that you as faculty note in your syllabus that it is a requirement that students wear face coverings, and that if they have a disability that precludes them from doing that, that they visit the SDRC prior to entering your classroom. That if they do not wear a face covering in your classroom, they may be referred to the Office of Student Conduct, and you can pull this language directly off of the COVID in the Classroom document and to show them that this is bigger than any of us just making a decision, and that they can, in extreme circumstances, be removed from the course. Now, none of us wants a student to be removed from the course. I think that but we want to outline that that's a potential outcome. So letting them know it's a possibility if there is continued violation, or if they are defiant about it, is critical. If they're like, I had no idea that it would be this big a deal, they don't feel like the learning has occurred. It feels unfair. The university is not treating them fairly, and that's not going to go well for anyone. Also, there are times when if a student has 12 hours and we remove them from a course and now they have 9 hours, they may lose some financial aid eligibility. They may lose, progression because it's a prerequisite. Removing a student from a course is a big deal. So we want to be able to show, I warned the student, I followed with an email that said, please know if this happens again, you could be removed from the course. Outline those consequences, even though you're letting them know you do not want that to occur. Use a public health incident report form. So we are trying to make this as straightforward for faculty as possible. There's a brand new form. And so if you go to sc.edu and you type in even just public health incident report form, we've got the link here in the chat box. But there's a make a report page. You scroll down and you will find this exact form. Documenting how you communicated the consequences. If you have to make a report, it's going to ask you that. Tell me how you documented that they could be removed from the course. If you're like, here's my cut and paste right off of my syllabus that says that and says I don't want to have to do that, fantastic. Here's where I can document in my first day plan that I told them about it, and here's the follow-up email after I warned them verbally, handed them a mask, told them to leave the class and that I may be making a referral to you, and that follow-up email said you may be removed from the course. So they can come to our office though, we're going to have all of that documentation and say, look, we may have to remove you from the course. Any student who is alleged to have violated any part of the code of conduct has the ability to say, I want to go to a jury of my peers. We owe them that right. So they could say, and then they go to a jury of their peers, and their peers say, you know what, I think that this student doesn't warrant that level just yet. We're going to use a different progressive discipline step that may be one step back. No, this stick is large. We want it to be effective. However, there are no guarantees because we're dealing, 1, with human behavior, and 2, with students' rights, and 3, with their ability to contest what a member of the Office of Student Conduct says is the prescribed outcome they can always go to a jury of peers, faculty, and staff and say, hey, I'm really sorry, can I have one more chance? And also, please know, a first offense rarely results in removal. We do have a matrix that says this is what happens based on different levels of severity. And so the first offense would have to be something very defiant. And so to manage the expectations, please know the first offense will rarely result in removal from a course. And strategies for absences, and this includes students who are sick and quarantined, and also includes students who may not be willing to share with you that they are uncomfortable being in class. Again, harkening back to one of the opening slides, it says students, with certain medical conditions may feel like they just can't take that risk, or it's coming from the anxiety that we spoke about. There are a lot of reasons why students who want to be in class physically may feel like they cannot, and they may not want to tell you that. So what are all of the ways that we wrap our brains around meeting their needs and students who are sick or quarantined? We do the attendance documentation. Again, our number one recommendation is the seating chart. And then if you notice a student is absent because you're able to easily identify that on the seating chart, you're reaching out to them and saying, hey, what's going on? And they say, hey, maybe I am uncomfortable. Okay, Blackboard Collaborate does allow you to live stream your course. It also allows you to take attendance from those students who are live streaming. When you set up a session to live stream, you create that session, you can click the attendance setting, and it can even say that students aren't marked as attending if they're more than 5 minutes late, or if they log off before the end of the course. It has lots of flexibility if you need to use that. There are other strategies. Top Hat is a platform. Again, these are fantastic and very interactive and very engaging platforms, but we always want you to use what the university recommendation, the university supported platform is, and that's Blackboard Collaborate and Blackboard Ultra, that are fantastic. Doing some random checks, figuring out how to be adaptable for those students who feel like they cannot come to class or they have to make a choice to protect themselves will be something we've got to navigate in advance. If for some reason we don't expect this, you suspect that there's a falsification for an excused absence, since the new policy does differentiate between excused absences, and we have to give students excused absences if they are in quarantine or isolation, use the ombudsperson again. They will be able to verify which students have been identified and are supposed to be quarantined or isolated or have been diagnosed, and which are not. So we don't anticipate that, but there is a resource and a direct line of someone to connect with should you be suspicious. And be thinking as you're looking through your assignments, what could students who are quarantined but feel physically able to complete their work do if they can't be in the classroom to still get these points and complete this assignment? So again, as Maureen said, we're going to be more flexible in some ways by having an alternative assignment, or maybe there's a certain grade that gets dropped just because of the situation that we're currently in. So again, our ethos is we're in it. It's difficult for you, it's difficult for them, but you have the power to be that connector, to be the one that hooks them, that makes sure that they know we're doing the best we can. And you know what? We're going to fall on our faces once or twice this semester, and that doesn't mean we failed. That means that we're all working toward the same goal of getting them through loving the course, getting them through with a grade that they think that is amenable to their work. So we've got to make sure that they know you're invested in their success, that we've got to make sure that they know if they hit some unforeseen challenges that they can come to you and that we will work that out, even if it's through a referral and the touchy-feelies just give you the willies. That is okay too. Send them along to one of the resources that we've discussed here. Some of the caring behaviors that we hope you walk away with are ongoing check-ins and assuming the best. It's easy after we see the news and after we go into the grocery store to assume the worst in people sometimes and to become very cynical. Our students are starting fresh. They don't know what to do. They're looking for the tone. They're looking for how enforced it is. So let's assume that they want the best for themselves and that they are doing the best that they can. Give them a chance to correct behaviors. Meet them with kindness and compassion. If we meet them with a stark, you're out of here, nothing goes well after that. But if they know that you care, it's harder to be mean to somebody who is being very compassionate toward you. Report to the care team. We're now called the Student Care and Outreach Team. Please let us know. That's formerly the Behavioral Intervention Team. Let us know if there's a student that you're concerned about and that you've reached out to and you can't quite get a connection to. We're happy to help. And balance the expectations in your syllabus with their life circumstances. So thinking about how you want to set a standard, but you also want to be flexible, especially when it comes to deadlines or breaking large assignments apart to make them a little bit more palatable and achievable. So we want to hold students accountable. We want the same academic standards. We just want our faculty to make sure that students know that if they can't meet that standard, not to give up. That's what this is all about. It is easy to give up, and there's no reason to when people are signing up for this webinar because you care and you want to do your best by them.